The Dig is one of LucasArts' weirdest adventure games. It's a sci-fi story about 3 astronauts with dangerously incompatible personalities, trapped on a bizarre alien planet light years from Earth. It features obscure puzzles, beautiful art, and a story dreamed up by Hollywood legend Steven Spielberg. And even though it's not on the level of classics like Monkey Island or Day of the Tentacle, it's a genre deep cut that anyone who really loves adventure games should experience at least once. While working on Amazing Stories, a science fiction anthology TV series he created for NBC, Spielberg came up with a story about an archaeological dig on an alien planet. However, realizing a television budget couldn't do it justice, he put the idea on ice. But then Spielberg found a way to bring it to life, with a little help from his old pal, Star Wars creator George Lucas. LucasArts, then Lucasfilm Games, had developed a point-and-click adventure based on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Spielberg, an avid gamer, was impressed. A meeting was set up at Skywalker Ranch, ideas were thrown around, and the concept for what would become The Dig gradually began to take shape. Over time, the characters, story, and locations would change dramatically, but the fundamentals of Spielberg's story remained intact. Archaeologists uncovering the remains of an ancient alien civilization on another world, and then, under the influence of what they find there, turning on each other. The Dig begins with a radio telescope detecting a massive asteroid heading for Earth. With doomsday rapidly approaching, the governments of the world devise a plan to knock the rock off course with a series of nuclear explosions. Interestingly, Michael Bay would use the same premise just 3 years later in his apocalyptic cheese fest Armageddon. A pre-mission press conference introduces us to the game's heroes: Commander Boston Lowe, journalist Maggie Robbins, and scientist Ludger Brink. While most LucasArts adventures boast a large cast of oddball characters, almost all of the Dig is spent in the company of these 3 and their conflicting personalities. Robbins is uptight and combative, Brink is pompous and self-regarding, and Lowe is practical and easygoing. From the earliest scenes you can sense the tension in their dynamic, and it only gets worse as the game goes on and their situation grows more dire. The dialogue is great and well acted too. The convincing, natural-sounding banter between the 3 characters is one of the highlights of the game. The mission goes to plan, but there's more to the asteroid than meets the eye. It's actually an alien spacecraft which whisks Lowe and his team away to another planet in a distant star system. Getting home becomes their next priority, and this is where the story gets wild. Whoever lived on this barren world has long since left, leaving behind strange ruins. The Dig is a slow, understated game that's more Solaris than Star Wars. There are a few moments of action, but mostly you're just wandering around, solving puzzles and poking through the ruins for a way home. Being an adventure game from the 1990s, puzzles are a big part of the Dig, and unfortunately they're the worst thing about it. LucasArts puzzles are obscure at the best of times, but the Dig takes it to another level. Shrinking a sweater in a dryer for 200 years to thaw out a frozen hamster in Day of the Tentacle was ludicrous, but it was at least tethered loosely to real-world logic. The Dig, however, features a confusing collection of orbs, crystals, and weird alien machinery that will have all but the most patient adventurers reaching for a walkthrough. This does give you the feeling of being an archaeologist, deciphering the enigmatic culture of a lost alien civilization, but it's also pretty boring. It's the story, atmosphere, setting, and characters that make the Dig worth revisiting. Spielberg's love of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, a 1948 adventure film starring Humphrey Bogart, inspires one of the game's biggest dramatic hooks. In the movie, a gold discovery makes Bogey's character crazy and paranoid. In the game, it's a cache of crystals that can raise the dead, and a geologist, Brink, who loses his mind. After being revived by them, he becomes erratic and illogical, behaving like a desperate drug addict, which creates even more tension in the group. The Dig's background art, music, and atmosphere have held up, even if the pointing and clicking hasn't. But for everything else it does well, it's still worth playing, and the Steam version runs perfectly on a modern PC. Just make sure you hit Alt and S to disable texture smoothing, which ruins the game's sharp, detailed pixel art. The central mystery grabs you the moment you land on this vivid planet, and it was a desire to find out more about it that got me through the worst of the puzzles. Like so many ambitious sci-fi stories though, The Dig falls apart at the end. All of the planet's mysteries are suddenly explained in a single conversation, and the game instantly loses one of its strongest assets. It's the mystery that makes the game compelling, and losing it left me feeling slightly empty. It's not that the big reveal is bad, just that not knowing is always more interesting than knowing. The Dig spins a great sci-fi story, the environments are stunning, and the conflict between the three characters provides some captivating human drama. If Monkey Island is LucasArts' summer blockbuster, this is their weird, experimental art house movie, and I'm glad Steven Spielberg chose a video game as the medium to tell this fascinating story.